Welcome to Integrated Rhythm with Chisomo and Bobby. Two swing dancing besties navigating race and the black experience in swing dancing, jazz dancing, and other Afro-centric social dancing. In today's episode, we talk about the most recent Move Together, Build Back Together talk that was done a few weekends ago. That talk was also really exciting for me because I got to see Chisomo, and we got to see Laurel Ryan, and we got to see Nico Centino, as well as so many other incredible people, many of which we hope to eventually have on the podcast. So it was a great time. You know, in that intense, educational, cathartic way that anything at this point in the world is an enjoyable time. So the other thing we want to do before you get started in this episode is we want to take a brief moment. We're on to like 32 episodes now, and we want to take a moment to thank some of our great patrons who've helped out. Now, a lot of people have helped out, and it's been wonderful, and I know that a lot of you have given small doses here and there in donations, and we can't thank you enough. We really, really appreciate it. It helps us keep the lights on, as it were, in this studio of our minds. And we do also have some patrons from Patreon who give monthly, and we have two enormous donors who really helped us be able to survive and do this kind of thing during the pandemic. And so we want to thank, first off, Lawrence Kalantari. Thank you so much for all of your support. And Karen Schreiber. Karen is amazing, and Karen, it's not your fault that your parents didn't know about the whole Karen situation and what would happen. You are an awesome Karen. You are a Karen who is so not a Karen, and we love you, and we thank you so much for your support. And we also have some patrons to thank from our Patreon, and so we would like to give a shout out to those names really quick. We've got, I'm so sorry, I'm going to mess up these names, and I don't want to, so I'm going to try to do the best I can, and I apologize if I do mess up. We have Amy Sorensen, Nika Jin, Emily Benz, Angel Genio, Nick Krushank, Taylor Stender. I hope you're listening. You're probably going to hear some of your friends' names. Selena Cruz, Ryan Lamar, Kaylin Halliday, Tara Slawinski, Rebecca Harris, Lori Taniguchi. We talk about Lori in this very episode. She's awesome. Christian Fromalt, Allison Frey, Lucy Mazzanti, Gary Chi, Laura Winley, and Lynn Maslin. Thank y'all so much for your support and your ongoing support. It means so much to us. And anyone who's given anything, we thank you so much for both your monetary support and your spiritual support, especially if you can't give any of the money. We appreciate so much your spiritual support. All right, hit it, Michelle and Laurel.
Rhythm, integrated rhythm with Chisomo and Bobby. One more time. Rhythm, integrated rhythm with Chisomo and Bobby. Yeah.
I can hear you now. It was frozen for a hot second, but we're talking about life, right?
My internet connection is unstable. That's the truth. Oh, internet. Oh man.
It's okay.
Just one of the many things that are unstable right now. Computers.
Many things.
So we're holding on. You hold on. You get, you just try to keep it together as best you can. We won't judge each other. We'll just call each other in, not out, and then we can all be, exactly, as Chisomo calls it,
Hope-timistic. We'll be hope-timistic. So I'm optimistic, but more than that, I'm hope-timistic. So, well.
And this is our special Move Together, Build Back Together, check it out episode. So if you're listening to this, please don't assume that you've heard the entire epic talk, Move Together, Build Back Together. This is a conversation we're having about the talk. This is not a summation of all of its values. Not anywhere near that. So you should definitely go check it out. The Move Together, Build Back Together. You can just type that into YouTube, click, hit enter, and then you'll see it. It's about 3 hours. So maybe take it in some chunks because it is so much great information. It's a lot of awesome information, very dense, but that's a way of saying maybe take it in a few hour chunks, take some notes, take a breather, come back to it. But I just thought overall it was just it was a fantastic time. Plus we got to see Shar, we got to see Chisomo rocking it several times throughout the presentation.
Rocking it. Yeah, it was a privilege to be a part of that presentation. And so I would say if if you are an organizer for a dance scene, or if you are a participant, if you've thought about dancing, if you've thought about engaging in events to any degree, you should definitely watch it.
So, like everyone who would be listening to this podcast, except for
Anyone who listens to this podcast, 100%. Well, because like some of the topics, you might be like 3 hours. I know I get it, because whenever I see something, if someone's like, "Oh, watch this video, it's 15 minutes," I'm like, "Nah, brah, nah."
Is there a shorter version of it? Can you just? I
You
can
might,
watch it like 1.5 speed.
exactly. You might be like, "Why should I spend 3 hours watching this presentation?" Well, it has really great information about COVID-19 and group gatherings, basically of any kind. So if you're wondering, like, how can I engage, or what's safe in terms of COVID-19, there are doctors involved with this presentation. If you're curious about hiring practices, when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, there's a specialist associated with that. If you want to know about a variety of different topics, there it's embedded in that presentation. There's so much.
Oh yeah, and like if you care about the number of letters behind people's names, this
Yeah.
presentation has got you covered. There are so many letters after people's names, doctors and associate professors and um, other doctors. Yeah, it's very experienced crowd, and you can tell based on how much information they give you in such a short amount of time.
Yes, exactly. And so definitely check it out. Check it out.
So we're just going to run over a few thoughts that we had on it. Again, this is not at all inclusive of the entire value of the thing. You really got to go watch it yourself. But we're just going to chat about some of the things that we saw. So let's see. Starting off, Dr. Kasim, I believe that's how you pronounce
Yes.
their name.
Andy, yes, she's amazing.
Uh,
Personal hero.
yeah, she's great. And she one of the things that struck me is she talked about how it's all about looking at this through your everyday lens, right? This is not just something having a better eye towards the Black experience and racial experiences in America is not just about like the next swing event you go to, but it's about how you look at it through everything in your life. And that reminded me as a swing teacher, the things that my students are likely to pick up the quickest and get the best are things that we can immediately apply to like their everyday life, right? Think about like working on your dance posture, that kind of stuff. Like that's not just stuff for your dancing, that's stuff that you can walk out the door and practice right away. So yeah, that just kind of reminded me of that really like fundamental learning concept, that if it's something that you can make a habit of you every day, that's a great thing.
Yeah, I really liked that as she talked about, and so just to give a background, once again, like Bobby said, everyone has several letters behind their name, and so Dr. Kasim, her PhD is in social justice and specific to diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and so she's able to deliver information about the history of racism and where we are today and how to move forward. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant line. And so I loved her reminder about reciprocal engagement. And so one of the anecdotes to not understanding disadvantage, not understanding racism, not understanding power and privilege, is exchanging stories and connecting with people in a reciprocal way. And so I personally feel like our podcast does a really nice job of existing in the space, Bobby, because that's essentially what this is set up to do, is for us to share stories and to have a platform to elevate stories that might not have been otherwise, that people might otherwise not have easy access to. And so when I think oftentimes when we think about how can we dismantle racism or how can we dismantle systems of oppression, we think about like these big overarching things, these like, let's get more people in government, more people in education, more people. And while all of that is necessary, that is made more easily by what you just said. If we were all to ask questions in our everyday, we would build a better society because we're beginning to interrogate things individually on our own, right? So I agree with you. I love, absolutely adore her and all the things that she has to say.
And then she had that really killer mic drop moment at the end of her speak where she was talking about how you get nothing but you get nothing but good things out of a diverse group
Right.
of people working together. Like the diversity just brings so many more strengths that people don't know about, that because people aren't from that cultural background, so they don't they don't think to look for ideas in the same way that the people from different cultural backgrounds look for their ideas. And she that the big mic drop moment was when she was like, when she was like, hey, if the COVID response had been done from a very diverse group of researchers and scientists and government people trying to like work out a plan, she was like, it would have gone a lot better than it
Mm-hmm.
did. And that's one of those things when you look at all what she had said and everything, you're like, oh wow, yeah, I could totally see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know. So you might feel like nothing is missing in your life, being we as people seek often sameness. We seek to connect to and to feel like we are in a place and we're a place where we're accepted, and that often leads to oh my goodness, a homogeneous experience where we find people who are just like us. So when we're comfortable, we often don't realize what we're missing. But as you mentioned, diversity adds so much beauty and interesting perspective, things that we would have never thought of to make life richer. And so when we have diverse leadership or when we have diverse representation, then we get to do these really cool things, but we don't have access to that until we we start to open the doors and dismantle the systems that are preventing that. But we don't know what we don't know. We don't know how much better our current life and existence could be until we expose ourselves to difference. And so, yeah.
After that, we had Nico, our friend Nico, who was on our last episode, by the way. So if you haven't checked it out, be sure to check it out. Dr. Nicholas Centino, who talked about, what was really cool about Nico is he could talk, he could give a great historical laydown of a rich cultural history behind all the swing dance stuff, and instead he was like, he's like, instead I'm going to talk about the future and he kind of used kind of like some statistics about how like we're not going to be a majority country long, right? Like the white majority is becoming more and more of a minority. And so, by like 20, 30, 40, 50 years, our country's going to look really different. And and he was talking about how like if we want the swing scene to survive for that long, we have to like look towards that future and we have to like think have that kind of in the back of our minds about. And we talk a lot. One of the interesting themes that I think has been a common theme on integrated rhythm is the importance of family in the Black American experience and how that relates to the dancing and swing dancing and swing dancing's history. So it's a family affair, and how that generational way of thinking of like it's not just us right now enjoying this dance, it's the future enjoying this dance, and it's the past that gave us this dance, and how can we like think about all those things together.
Yeah. 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 Nico, man, he's just a boss, right? And so I do think that notion of not only where are we now, but where are we going? And um, just that a reminder that it's important, like diversity is important, not just now, but when we look at who is actually having children and who's going to be around and making decisions, like is only beneficial to be inclusive. So yeah, yeah,
Then after that, Marie and I, once again, Dr. Marie and I,
yeah.
which sounds like it sounds like a British period drama, Dr. Marie and I. It's you picture there being just like lots of fields and yeah. Anyway, but Marie and I talked about how if we want to do this, if we want to like welcome more Black people into the scene and people of color, and we also have to make sure to fix. It's not about getting more fuel in the scene's tank of energy. It's also about like figuring out where the leaks are. This is my analogy, by the way. She doesn't make this analogy. But like the leaks in the fuel tank. Why do people of color and other people want to leave the scene? Why do they not stick around for very long? We got to fix those things before we can truly, have a safe place for more people to be welcomed into.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of addressing that revolving door. And I I know that this comes up later, but it makes me think about the notion of safety. Um, and as we develop safe spaces, safe space policies, I know lots of different employers, so not just in swing dancing, but employers in general, have been asking the question, how do we keep our employees safe? How do we, at educational institutions, how do we keep our students safe, et cetera? And safety is tricky because safety is determined by the people who are undergoing the experience and not necessarily by anybody else. So I can't determine, Bobby, if you're safe, right? I might try to create an environment that is safe for you, but I'm doing that from my own perspective. And so, and I might think like, oh, I'm safe. The place that I make is safe. So of course you should feel safe. But that's not the case, right? Only you can determine that. And so I think when we look at the issue of the revolving door and the leaks, as you mentioned, there has to be engagement with the people who are leaving to understand why that's happening. And we know from lots of conversation, in some cases, we do know why people are leaving, and so it is incumbent upon us. It is important for us to make changes so that more people feel safe, to make changes to make sure that people who are rendered invisible are recognized, to make changes so that people who are rendered hypervisible can exist without being hunted and so on. And so we have to ask. I know that a lot of people are kind of just jumping back into activities like we were before the pandemic, but I feel like this really should cause some pause, you know?
One thing she also mentioned, so she mentioned that if you want to do this, if you're a white person or a non-black person who wants to like understand this, it's books are a great place to go to, but they're not going to do it alone. You need to immerse yourself in the culture, which I thought was such a great point and uh, such a poignant point, if that is the way that should be said. I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh, and she went on to say, the things that make her think of Black American culture and art are things like communication and rhythm and play and competition and improvisation, and how all of those things are an important thing to understand about Black American culture as a way of like kind of trying to understand what's going on. What a
Mhm.
vague way for me to end that sentence, but there you go.
But so Marie, Tina Morales, and myself were all together in this section of Move Together. And so in the first section, there was really kind of the establishing of why diversity, right? And in this section, we're talking about is the cultural heritage section. And so the things that we're thinking about are the fact that swing dances are not just an art form, but they're sociocultural. So there's the social aspect and this cultural aspect. And so if you don't come from those cultures and aren't acculturated in that social landscape, then how can you connect to that? And so many people get into swing dancing later on in life and may not have like an understanding of the cultural underpinnings behind the dance. And so we are, what we've seen, especially in the last 30 or so years, is that people have kind of learned some historical things and picked and chosen what's interesting to them. But it's so important not just to kind of admire history from afar or kind of pick and choose certain cultural elements, but to be immersed in that. And Bobby, I really love what you just mentioned about that, like getting to know the culture, like forming a relationship with the culture, a relationship with the people, which is a messier process, right? It's not as easy, it's not as codified as like learning this thing, like this is what musicality means, this is what improvisation means, this is what, like it's not that easy. It's more about asking some questions. And then even if you're in a culture, and this is one of the things that I think I said is that I'm Zambian, but I still have had to do some dedicated work to learn about my own history and my own culture. I've still needed to take some time to ask some questions and to get to know my family and to get to know my history in a way, rather than just it being a passing part of my life. I have to actually dive in and get into those messy places. And that has to do with my own culture. So, what more of another culture, So, yeah.
No, absolutely. And that makes me think of, and even studying my own like waspy Southern culture, like I'd spent most of my life just kind of going along with it. And, because that was the norm. I was just like, oh, okay, this is who I am. And I do the things that I do because I choose to do them. It has nothing to do with generations of programming via society and where I grew up. Right. And so, and that's been a really, that's not just something that that's not just a journey that I'm on for my own self awareness and my own understanding of who I am and where I come from. It's also been really important to my dance journey, right? Because we've talked about this before on the podcast that I was 18 before I took my first dance step. Like that was the first time that I really like thought to myself, I would like to move my body to music. And that's that culture is the exception to the rule when you look at everyone else in the world. Like if you look at the world entire, that's the exception to the rule, to like not have someone move to music until they're 18 years of old, you know. And many people in my family still do not have the urge to get up and move to music. And like why is the wedding dance the like one time that like so many people in waspy culture will decide to move themselves to music? But that's beside the point. Anyway, point being, yes, I agree with all of this.
Can we just also have an appreciation for your language? Because when you said, when we look at the whole world entire, like my heart just took a moment. It was like, wow, what a beautiful turn of phrase. I was just enamored in that moment. Like, yes, if we do look at the whole world entire. So,
This also reminds me, I think our listeners, hopefully listening to this podcast has been at least a small way that you can, immerse yourself in different cultures, because and it makes me think back to our second or our third episode, Zen AF, with Stephanie AK Schilling. You should check it out. But that entire episode, we don't really talk about racism outright. Like we're not tackling hard questions. That's just a conversation with a person of color about their life experiences and things that we all have in common. Like, that was a friend's conversation, but that's a great example of how it's not just about answering the hard questions.
Yeah. I think in order to understand ourselves and other people in the full spectrum of our humanity, we have to look beyond just these specific codified moments of where racism or dismantling oppression is a pat answer, right? We need to think about other experiences, like, and this is why being intentional about intersectional lenses is really important as well, because there are compounding effects when you start thinking about COVID-19, or you start thinking about mental health, or you start thinking about healthcare in general, being a Black woman, navigating healthcare and what that means and how you're perceived, like, so these, or even thinking about ableism, and so it's important. So I agree with you, Bobby. Yeah.
You heard enough, and now it's time for the break.
You know that we here at Integrated Rhythm love supporting Black-owned businesses. Well, guess what? There is a huge Black-owned business right here in the swing dance scene, and that is the Black Lindy Hoppers Fund. They do incredible stuff. They're collecting oral histories of our legacy. They are running workshops that are incredible with, online workshops that anyone can take part in and that their members can take part in, and they're just doing amazing stuff. And it's headed by 4 incredible people, 2 of which we've already had on the podcast, and 2 more of which we hope to have someday on the podcast. But that's Latasha Barnes, Tina Morales Armstrong, Marie Ndai, and Julia Loving. 4 incredible people in charge of such a thing are gonna do some incredible things, and so please throw some money at them. Also, you should go to Black Lindy Hoppers Fund website and check out their resources tab. That thing will get you to instructors, musicians, DJs, MCs. That will get you to the Black people that you would love to hire to make your event have great diversity and support the legacy of Black American in jazz and jazz dance. Also, our music, once again, is Baron Ryan. Check out his music, baronryan.com. That is Laurel Ryan's brother, and he's awesome. You can also check out firstofitskind.net, which is where this music comes from. Rights-free music that anyone can use, including us. Hey everybody, this is Bobby White from Integrated Rhythm. We're here to ask you to please consider donating to the podcast. You can do so by going to patreon.com/integratedrhythm. You can do so by Venmoing at Bobby Swungover. And make sure to put a little IR in the note so we make sure it goes to the right people. You can also do so by PayPaling at BobbyWhite3. And once again, putting a little IR in the window there. Doing so will help us keep this podcast going, and we love doing it, and we hope you love it too. If you can't afford to donate at this time because times are rough, we totally understand. We don't want you to put yourselves out. We want you to keep enjoying the podcast for free. However, if you have a little bit of pocket change in your pocket, we would greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate it. Thanks, and have a great day.
The break is over, now it's back to the show.
Next up, we had a little someone called Chisomo give a little talk on coloniality. Are we always asking Black people to come to us into this majority white space as opposed to, in what ways are we asking to go to them? Are we taking the time to create relationships and an exchange of ideas, which I know just kind of like that does go into what we just talked about a little bit.
Yeah, and I think the concept of coloniality is one that's definitely important to spend some time investigating, because this is how these systems of oppression impact our everyday life, right? And so um, coloniality seeks to understand in order to control versus allowing others to express for themselves what it means to be. And so, a thing that I've been thinking about a lot recently is the idea of should. Anytime we look at another person or another group and think they should do X, that in and of itself is essentially an expression of oppression. It might seem really mild, or it might seem innocuous, but it that notion of us thinking that somebody else should do something else, it should make us like that is making me take a step back these days. I'm like, whenever I have this like you should, I'm like, well, do they want to? um can they? What are the other contributing factors and so on? And then who is more often saying should, and so if that group who's saying should is a marginalized group, I am more willing to ask myself, should I do this? But if the group saying should is a group that historically has had power, then I am more likely to question that should. So but coloniality is an interesting concept and construct because it impacts the way that we see the world. So I'd definitely say, look it up, check that out, do some research.
Yes, no, that's a great way of putting it. The idea of should, and I've said this before on the podcast, and it really is worth saying again occasionally. One of the most important things in my journey was the time when I went from thinking, "Oh yes, we should absolutely have uh, people of color. We should absolutely have people from all different living experiences be a part of this dance." Going from that mindset to then adding on, and I should not try to control the outcome. Because it was one thing to say, oh, yeah, we should invite more people into the space. But in my head, thinking like, and then the dance will look like this, and have like a clear idea in my head of what it's supposed to look like. And then when I took that idea away, like, oh, no, no, because I'm no longer, I'm now a co-ownership with all these other experiences, and us together are what's going to decide what the scene is going to be. So letting go of that like sense of ownership over the scene was a very important step in my own process.
Yeah, sorry, I was snapping and agreeing. Yeah, I love that. Letting go of the outcome and allowing things to be what they are. I love that, Bobby. Um, yeah, and co-owning, going back to that idea of reciprocal engagement, right? I think sometimes I know I've experienced this where when the idea is, okay, we need diversity, so let's go out and get some diversity. And I end up being one of those people that's chosen to be like part of that diverse group. So I'm like, okay, so I'm here. I'm here. Why? I'm here. Oh, for diversity. And then they're like, okay, you are the Black person and you are going to do the Black person thing, you know? And so it's a very prescribed, like people are like, they're well intentioned, but there's a very prescribed notion of what your role is as the diverse person coming in. Like, you're going to do this thing. And so then I'm like, okay, then I'll just be here, you know?
Oh man. And I like, uh it's understandable that it can be hard to let go of that, for some people. I totally get it. I myself, I've invested so much care in so much of my life in, the scene and what the dancing means to me, that it can be, it again, like it was kind of like stepping off of a cliff a little bit, to be like, just let go of, what you think the future of this dance should be. And it turned out to be kind of like in Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade, when he takes that step and he just like whoop steps on a piece of rock that is painted perfectly like the cliff from whatever angle that you look at. Um, it's a very impressive paint job. Um, but the analogy stands that so far it's been an incredibly rewarding experience, and if anything, it relieves some of the pressure of anxiety of like, there's a lot of anxiety about what the future of the scene looks like, especially when you're like, well, we need it to be more X, Y, and Z, and we need to like get that as soon as possible, and there's a lot of understandable anxiety with that, and the idea of kind of like in a healthy way letting go of what you think the scene should look like 50 years from now, and kind of leaving it up to the scene as a whole to make that decision, especially as it gets more diverse, especially as these changes start to take effect. That should hopefully be a lot less anxiety for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like we should be hope-timistic.
Absolutely. So then they had Lori Taniguchi came on and talked about Elif, which, if you don't know, is everybody leads, everyone follows. And it's a style of teaching that was developed specifically, the Elif kind of trademark. It's not really trademark, but we got to give a shout out to Randy Maestretti and Kara Britt, or to Kara Britt and Randy Maestretti, who put together this lesson concept in that Lori was talking about. And um, and yeah, so you should check that out, listen more about that. But another thing that Lori mentioned was forming your swarm, which is where you get a group of people together to bounce ideas off of, to kind of keep the conversation going, and to help give you a little bit of social motivation to help keep yourself thinking about these things and bouncing ideas off of each other. And I thought that was such a, she's form your swarm immediately. Everyone was like, yeah, form your swarm, because it's a great way of putting it. And that definitely, like, I already have some friends that I bounce ideas off of, such as Chisomo. And then I realized that, oh wait, I could go a few steps further and like kind of try to make it a thing with friends who are enthusiastically consenting to such a relationship, of kind of playing around with ideas and kind of constantly having check-ins with my friends.
Yeah. I it's a wonderful way to keep moving. I think the question is, so last year, 2020 was a wild year. And so in that we had COVID, and then we also had the death of George Floyd, which kicked off this seemingly new sense of realization, right? So I always like to say that we know that these issues have been happening for a long time. This is not new, but in 2020 we had a collective awareness that rivaled the 1960s, right? And in many ways set off the largest global civil rights movement that we've ever seen, because it wasn't just the United States. This was a ripple effect throughout the world. So now we're a year later, we're in the summer of 21. What has happened? What are we doing? How are we moving forward? And what are we going to say of ourselves in the summer of 22? And I think the notion of form your swarm helps people keep themselves accountable and helps to drive conversations forward in an organic way, right? Because we see what change looks like when it's not organic, or when people are really only like elevating platitudes because they think that they have to. But when you're in a community, you are more likely to do some really interesting things. And Bobby, in a previous episode, you've talked about this phenomenon when when innovation has sparked, and like these amazing mavericks, so to speak, have come out of the woodwork. And we often look at those individuals, but those individuals existed in a community, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I love about Lori's, form your swarm kind of way of thinking about it is, we've talked a lot about, the great books and great reading, great resources for you to go to educate yourself on, and those are obviously very important. We that's a very important part of the experience of awareness growing. Something that about Form Your Swarm that I found really appealing is that it encapsulates that kind of book club aspect of it and then grows it, because now you're not just reading books and talking about the books and ideas. Now you're bouncing ideas off of each other about what can you do in your scene, what's the next step that you can take locally to enact some of the things that you've been learning about through your education. So I just Form Your Swarm.
Yeah, it's great. And buzz, right? Swarm and then take that swarm, keep moving.
It's
So
also got energy, man.
yeah,
Lori,
yeah. So great.
shout out to Lori Taniguchi. The next thing that happened, and you should definitely check this out if you're a promoter or involved in your local promotion, scene promoting, band hiring, any of that kind of stuff, you should definitely check out the part of the Move Together talk where Tina Morales Armstrong and Michael Gamble talked about their events and how they work their events and how they think about hiring and a lot of the ideas that they've been playing with the last few years. Uh, Lots of great info there that, you should definitely just go and check out. Then Move Together showed this really cool, like, infomercial hot take on a group called Swing Diversity, which is doing stuff in the West Coast swing community. And I have to say that was really cool. Little, their infomercial was really cool. They're doing not only training and offering scholarships, they're also doing a lot of work gathering statistics and showing like the history of their scene and statistics based on like, um, racial experiences, cultural backgrounds, age, all sorts of stuff so that they can see where they've been, see where they are, and see where they're going when they get there. But Dory came on, Dr. Dory Segev and Hillary Alexander. Dory talked about how vaccine-only events are, in his opinion, the only reasonable way to get to dancing safely again and responsibly again. And again, like if you have questions about that, or if you're wondering, what all went into that, we're not doctors, so we don't feel the safest in talking about it. But you should go listen to Move Together and check out that part. So that's happens near the end. I'm just now doing a play-by-play of the thing, which I didn't necessarily want to do because I want you all to watch it. But hey, you can also use this as like a guide to your journey through the Move Together talk. And then finally, Chisomo, who is awesome, gave the fastest PowerPoint presentation in the history of PowerPoint presentations.
Oh man, yes, that was funny. Yeah. Was I the one with the PowerPoint? I think I might have been the only one with the PowerPoint.
I think you were the only one with the PowerPoint.
I was.
But it was great. You had a PowerPoint. You had,
Yeah.
intriguing visuals and eye-catching information slides, and yeah, it was great.
Thank you. Yes, I did, because I try to say I'm not type A, and I don't really think I am, but the fact that I had a PowerPoint and like had to stick to the PowerPoint also is really great data and evidence that I might have type A tendencies.
Type A-ish.
Yes,
A-ish.
A-ish. But yeah, I did have a little PowerPoint. Were there any specific things that stuck out to you in that situation?
How fastly you're trying to get through it because they were trying to in the thing.
It was like,
It was
this was
fantastic.
supposed to be over 20 minutes ago. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but you ended it so beautifully with that quote from your Zambian president. Was it the president of Zambia?
Yeah. So recently, Kenneth Kaunda, who was our founding president in Zambia, he just passed away. And so that is, it's a moment of mourning, not just for Zambia, but for countries all over Africa. In fact, there was a ceremony in Kenya a few days ago. And so Kenneth Kaunda was one of many freedom fighters, one of many African leaders. I've given presentations about Zambia's history and political structures. I've actually have a kind of standing guest speaking arrangement with one of the political science professors at BW at my university. And whenever I talk about independence, I talk about it as a time of revolution. And it was a global time of revolution because Zambia gained independence in 1964. If you think about where the world was in 1964, what was happening in the US in 1964, it was truly this time of fighting for independence in a variety of different ways. And in fact, Martin Luther King Jr. came to Zambia and had a relationship with Kenneth Kaunda. So this person is incredibly important in terms of as a historical figure, as a figure who has galvanized people. And so when we think about the phrase move together, the idea is, it obviously is a turn of phrase associated with dancing, but it's also a turn of phrase associated with moving our society, our community forward together. And so when I was asked to do the closing statement, the visionaries behind Move Together really wanted something that would call to this idea of unity. And in Zambia and Africa, we have this naturally embedded concept of unity through the construct of Ubuntu, UBUNTU. So, and you can see that in the leadership in Africa, and you could see that with Kenneth Kaunda. So I'm not telling you exactly what I said so that you can watch Move Together. but that gives you some context for my closing.
Awesome. Did you have any last thoughts that you wanted to say? Because Chisomo was part of the background. She was part of the organization. By the way, you can still contribute to the organization, and a lot of those contributions are going to the Black Lindy Hoppers Fund. So once again, check it out on YouTube. You can go and watch it and also still donate. And I mean, again, you'll just get so much information from it. Chisomo, any last words?
Yeah, I would say, I know that as people move forward, oftentimes the question is, what do I do? What's my role in this? And I think that Move Together is a great resource in and of itself. And I would also encourage you, while you're watching stuff, to watch last year's Move Together presentation as well, because last year talked a lot about the current landscape in 2020 and why we were where we were, and thinking about the perspectives of Black musicians, Black dancers, having some understanding of the history and why we are here. So I'd encourage you to look at that, but then also review this year's, because this year has a number of resources. And so in asking the question, what can I do? I would think about having a trauma-informed approach. And there are some really great resources readily available to you. The CDC actually has the 6 guiding principles to having a trauma-informed approach. And this is really important in all interactions. The first principle is safety. So that notion of safety that I was talking about, where you want to consider somebody else's safety, and in order to do that, you have to ask them. You can't make assumptions about what you're doing that makes other people feel safe. And so starting from there, collaboration is also one of the principles. So this idea of reciprocity and collaboration, having a back and forth exchange, is so important. And so there are things that we can do in our everyday. I would also say, if you're a teacher, there are lots of great resources about inclusive pedagogy. And I have so many thoughts about inclusive pedagogy, but I'll suffice it to say right now, check out Columbia University's Center for Teaching and Learning online. If you type in inclusive pedagogy, I believe workbook, that there are guiding principles for inclusive pedagogy. And so it's free. They're free resources. You can download PDFs where you get really great information about how to be inclusive. And so there's so much information out there. and we can make our scenes better. We can make our interactions better. We just have to do some work and then ask some questions and develop relationships. And so things aren't going to be better tomorrow, but we should make incremental steps towards change. And so those are some of my thoughts about that.
Those are fantastic thoughts. I can say that, here in New York, things are beginning to open up again. I'm starting to teach classes again. I'm teaching privates. I'm even going to be hosting a dance for once a month, which is really exciting for me. And I'm trying. It's on the one hand, there's a lot of work to be done about like how to do these the best ways that we can for the future that we want. On the other hand, it's also really exciting because there's a whole bunch of new ideas we get to try, and we get to do some new stuff and see how it goes, and that's really exciting for me. And
Yeah.
so I hope everyone has a exciting time working to have some awesome stuff happen with the scene now that everyone's coming back.
Yeah. And I think I love your growth mindset. I love your enthusiasm and excitement, because the bumps in the road that you'll come into, because you will come into bumps in the road, those are opportunities to learn. And so I love that you're like, we're going to do this. Let's try it out. Let's go. Yeah.
All right, Integrated Rhythm, we are so excited. We have our first piece of listener mail. That's right. You heard us right. Our first piece of listener mail. Um, but this is a dancer in the UK. We won't use their name because they did not give us any specific, desire or permission to do so. But they said, "Thank you for your podcast. To answer your question, what would you have done?" This is from our Three Little Girls. By the way, so the Three Little Girls episode, if you don't want to go back and listen to this awesome philosophical conundrum, the basic idea is that myself and my wife, two white people, were dancing in our park when three black girls came up and said they loved what we were doing. We were throwing around some air steps. They said they loved what we were doing, and we said thanks, and they want us to do it again. And we had the conundrum of like, do we like go into the history? Do we say this is your dance, a Black American dance? And there's obviously lots of things to think about regarding that, which we go into in the episode. And at the end of that episode, we said, by the way, what would you have done? Let us know. Send in your replies. And so this is a reply to that. They said, to answer your question, what would you have done? I would have asked the girls if they wanted to see some other steps and begun some jazz steps to see if they copied and had a go. Depending on if they were enjoying dancing, I would either have stayed with the jazz or had them try an 8-count rhythm or had them take turns to be a pair to try a glide. By the way, I don't know what a glide is. That might be a British term for a dance step. The hope being that they may go home and recruit a fourth friend to have a go. I would definitely have used the words jazz and Lindy Hop. Then they said, I train teachers of young children and so feel comfortable, but I can imagine why Bobby didn't know what to do. Most adults not used to small children, especially groups of them, feel unsure even without the emotionally loaded issue of race. It was interesting that Bobby used the term manipulative, but in a neutral way. Teaching and educating is basically manipulation, but using your manipulative powers for good rather than evil. Hope the life situation resolves itself as well as it can. Thank you, listener. So that was our listener's response. So I didn't understand all the terminology in there, but I think I got the basic idea that they were saying, okay, so start maybe showing them some stuff and make sure to drop some important names like jazz or Lindy Hop, which that's that could have gone somewhere, especially as they mentioned, if they seem interested, you can keep going, but otherwise, they're kids, they're just running around. They might be interested, they might not be. I don't know. Chisomo, did you have any thoughts?
I thought the idea of starting some sort of back and forth, especially considering solo jazz, so you're not having the physical contact question in there. I thought that was an interesting starting point. I
Yeah,
like
that's
that.
a good point.
It would be. I also feel like the part that I think I would have probably been curious about from this listener is like, how do you engage the conversation? I also I also work with quite a few little friends, and I love to hear their stories and then also tell them stories. So I would be curious about how other people might initiate a conversation about the history of jazz, because I believe that we can do that, right? I believe that we can give like a bite-sized something to little ones. And so yeah, Bobby, I love this question. I love the fact that you threw that out there, and I would love to hear more from other people. And so thank you so much to the listener who wrote to us. It's super exciting for us to get mail. I don't know if you ever remember your first email ever, but I do. When I was like, it's just so exciting.
Those of you out there, we would love to hear your answers to the Three Little Girls conundrum. intrhythm@gmail.com. That's intrhythm@gmail.com. I think it's really hard to spell rhythm in my head. So, might want to run that through spell check as well. intrhythm@gmail.com, which Chisomo is sign languaging, even though we're not quite sure yet if we're going to videotape this. But it's good to have there if we do show the video on YouTube. By the way, you can see all of our episodes, or not all of them. You can see many. There are a lot of them on YouTube, and they're on videos. Why am I still talking? I don't know.
Integrated rhythm with Chisomo and Bobby.